Hi there, everybody. Thank you so much for the warm welcome and the great introduction, and thank you to LinkedIn Local for the opportunity to share some thoughts and insights with you. I'd like to make this as interactive as possible, and my intention is that you leave today with something that you can implement in your business tomorrow. So as I'm going through, just put your hand up, ask a question, and if it's too long, I'll talk to you afterwards, but please feel free to just engage me as we're going through this so that you can take away something with of value that you can implement in your business. So as you're all knowing that it's way more expensive, and Kim will share with you that it's more expensive to get a new customer in than work with an existing customer. It's 6 or 7 times more expensive, and which stands to reason then that it is 60 to 70% higher likelihood that you'll be able to convince an existing customer to work with you. So there's a lot of economies of scale in that. Tonight, what I'm going to be doing is share with you a whole lot of strategies for a small entry-level business, which a lot of you are falling into. Thank you for sharing that. I've got some topics that will cover a more mature marketing. So for the lady that's doing the social media and wanting to talk to your clients about that, hopefully share some of those. And then some kind of high-level business opportunities or marketing strategies using data for, I suppose, more of a corporate or a larger company. And it may not be applicable. So as you were going through the room, I didn't feel that there were people that were in this space. However, paying attention to what we do in the beginning will help you understand the value that you can have at the end. So of those bigger, kind of more complex strategies. So I'll get into it. And so it really starts with data mining. And for me as a consultant, it's all about first understanding the business. I really need to get a real insight into the operations, how much marketing, who the people are that are involved in the business. And I suppose as a business owner, you already have that understanding, but getting a true metric of what the overhead costs are, what your operations are, who the people are, and how much time they're spending on each one of those elements in your business is a really important element to look at. Then understanding the data as a whole. So you're wanting to get a deeper understanding of what kind of data you're looking at, or what kind of data you have available to analyze. And what I'll do is I'll show that to you a little later on of a couple of examples of what that is. Then I go into a bit of data preparation. And that's just spending heaps of time in CRMs, Excel spreadsheets, and just looking at the data, making sure that there are no holes in the data, making sure that there's some compliance, that there's systematic ways of making sure that all the data is the same. And then this is the fun stuff. So for me, so data modeling, and so start looking at some pictures of what the data is telling me and start kind of creating stories around the data. And I'll share some of those models with you. And then I go into some evaluation, and that's really just understanding what it is that the data is telling me. And then lastly is doing some implementation. So any data analysis that you're doing, if there is no action that comes out of this out of the data, it's pointless, and don't do it. So if you can't action something from your understanding, there's no value in understanding data if you're not going to implement something afterwards. So this is my most exciting slide. It's probably the most horrible slide I've ever done, and it's just to give you an idea of what a spreadsheet kind of looks like. It's not exciting, it's not sexy. You're just going through every single line item, making sure that the format is correct, that you've got the first name in a block, this last name in a block, that the date format is correct. You're just going through every single block to make sure that it's compliant with whatever data formatting that you're using. Then the understanding the data. This is the section that I told you about. And so this is for that spreadsheet was for a client that I just did some consultancy work for. She sells toys online in Noosa. And these were a couple of things in her data set. So they had created at. So what does created at mean? So I needed to go and dig and understand what the date range actually meant, that it was created at a certain point, and needing to understand if it was the point that the customer registered, the point that the customer bought something, at the time that the customer unsubscribed. What does that created at mean? Customer status was one of the things that she had in. It was mentioning active. So when you become inactive or deactivated, it doesn't mean anything. Why do you have these things in your database? Has activity, and then there are a couple of databases that I work with that use strange acronyms. So AOV in this case was average order value. But if you don't understand the business and you don't understand what's going into that, it becomes a very challenging space to actually do any analysis or kind of provide any insight or value to the business owner. Yeah. It can be a CRM. It could also just be a SQL database. Eldest asked a question, if these variables are around your CRM, and it can be, but this specific database is from Shopify. So somebody had created an e-commerce a database for her on Shopify and did all those naming conventions for her. So some pictures. All right. So this is the pivot tables. And so I create this for all my clients. I go and create line graphs, bar graphs, clustered bar graphs, pie charts, and all of these help me understand and visualize the data as well as for my client. So as much as I look at a list of variables or numbers, so every month I can see how many people were on their website or how many sales they made, it's hard to kind of really understand the real value, especially when you're working with low numbers. I suppose if you're kind of thinking you had 10 sales last week and you're making 3 sales this week, 10 and 3 don't seem like such a big difference. But when you start putting that on a bar graph, you see these massive big variances and you go like, wow, that's a big change in activity that happened from one week to the next or 1 month to the next. So this was the sales that the lady in Noosa did, the toy company. And so I looked at all the sales that she had done by country. And so you can see that Australia is clearly the far winner, had way more sales than any other of her countries that she's dealing with. I then looked at, yes, sorry, Terry.
Yeah, sorry. I hope you don't mind me asking.
No, please, go for it.
When you look at the sales,
yes.
Do you actually take that into how much profit they make per country and where their real value is for their time?
Yes, I definitely do, and it's coming in like 2 more slides. I'll show you here. No, it's all good. So this is Google Analytics, and you should all be using Google Analytics on your website, and it will give you huge amounts of insight into the path, the motion path that people are traveling on your website. It will give you demographic information, so males, females, what percentages of those people are on the site, as well as age. For this specifically, I just looked at the country traffic. And so you can see there's about 50% coming from Australia, 30% from the US, and 8% from the UK. So that's about 90% of all the traffic is coming from those three countries. But if you remember the sales, so Australia was driving a very large part of the sales, or just about all of it. And so I looked at the conversion ratio. So of all the amount of people that she's putting on her site, only 0.43% of the Australians are actually converting. And then if you remember, there were 30% of her traffic was from the US. And so you're only getting 20 sales, so 0.01% of all the people in the US are actually converting. So that's a huge problem, but also an opportunity. So if I can increase that conversion ratio for the US people, I'm going to exponentially increase my sales. I've got all the people on the website, but they're not buying any products from me. So we then looked at, Terry, I hope this answers your question. We looked at the average order value for every single country. So $93 for the US, $107 for $93 for Australia, and $107 for the US. So the US is clearly a good market to go after. We just need to solve that conversion ratio for the client. Or looked at the UK, so they had 8% of the traffic, lower purchase value, so lesser of an exciting kind of market to go after. Then Japan, 243. They weren't even featuring on the amount of traffic. And so this is an outlier, right? So there were only a handful of people from Japan, but it's one of those things where there's a high enough order value which you should kind of start thinking about and go like, maybe I should put some ads to Japan and just do a test. And I'll share with you how to go about doing a test campaign later on. And then UAE, so United Arab Emirates. So I don't know, there's some sheikh somewhere buying toys for his kid, and I'll buy everything. And so once again, it's one of those metrics that you kind of go like, hey, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of cash on this, but it's worthwhile just doing a test and trying to figure out if there's value in that market. So then I looked at the highest basket value by day of week. And so this is something that is interesting for her specifically in that it can change your marketing behavior. So on Mondays and on Thursdays, people are spending more on those days. So I'm like, okay, so if they're spending more on those days, it means I can spend more on a cost per click, or I can spend more on my Facebook advertising, because on those days, my order value is higher, and I'm making a larger margin on those purchases, which essentially means that I can outbid my competitors on Google or Facebook or whichever platform you're using to really drive those additional revenue models. We also looked at the most popular day by week. So this is where you're getting the most amount of traffic. So sometimes what you'll find is that people are looking at one day on a Monday, but they're only making the purchase on a Wednesday or a Thursday. And so this is something to take account. In this case, however, Mondays are also very popular high traffic days. So my assumption for this client is that they went absolutely nuts over the weekend with their kids, driving them bonkers. Their kids were bored. Monday, mother goes in, hey, got to buy toys for next weekend so that we don't have the same problem again, right? And then just sort of back to that Friday, I forgot to get something for last weekend. Let me do some last minute purchases and get those toys in. Then looked at the gender. So 77% of all the purchases of this specific online store was for women, and males only 20%. So Ivan, for the financy guy, there's 3% of people that I didn't know what gender they were, and so they don't add up to 100%. And so there isn't some kind of magic software that does this. This goes back to your spreadsheet, and you're just going name by name and going like, is this a male? Is this a female? So sometimes you have to do a bit of stalking on Facebook to kind of make sure who it is. So a name like Lee, I don't know, it could go either way. Interesting though, the women were spending $77, so it's lower than the average spend, and their favorite day was Monday. Males spending a lot more, $108, and they were spending on Thursdays. So I don't know if the males were going to work on the week, wife's kind of bugging them, have you bought the toy? Yeah, I bought it. Thursday, I've forgotten to buy the toy. Quickly go online, feeling guilty, and then spend a whole lot more cash. So the women are a lot more prepared, I think, to buy the toy for the next weekend. Terry?
What's the age range for the toys? Between 2 and 10, or what? Yeah.
These were, they've even got toys for adults, so they had like puzzles for adults and stuff as well. But I would say it's more in that 2 to 10 kind of age range would be their primary kind of age group for kids. Okay, so some math. We're looking at the customer lifetime value, and this is really a key driver of making heaps of decisions in anything that you're doing. So I suppose I'm just trying to think of an example for anybody here. Maybe Bruce, you're doing leadership, and so If you're kind of thinking of clients doing multiple bookings with you, what's their lifetime value of that person? Same with your social media clients, is that how long are they staying with you? Are you kind of, hanging around for 2-3 months and they go like, social media thing's not working for me? Or are they sticking around for 2 or 3 years, and you really have an opportunity to build that community around that client? So it really takes the total revenue and divide that by the number of purchases, and that just gives you your kind of average purchase value. So I've just kind of worked on a coffee shop, thought about the Contiki building down the road here, and there's a coffee shop downstairs. And so what I'd like to prove to you, or I suppose if I should maybe ask you, is there anybody that would pay $100 to acquire a customer that spends $3 to $5 with you? Great. Let me prove you wrong. I will spend $100 to get a customer that buys coffee with me, and I'll show you why. So the average order is about $10. That means you're buying a coffee and a muffin, or you're buying you and somebody else a coffee, and so it's kind of in that $10 range. So we then need to look at the average purchase frequency. So how often people are actually coming back and buying from you over and over, right? And so I just made up some numbers here, and so looked at a number of purchases of about 100,000, and there you've got about 10,000 customers over a year period that are buying coffee from you. And so that means you've got about 100 average purchase frequency over a year period. Pretty sure most of you have more than 100 coffees a year. But if you kind of thought if you worked upstairs at the Contiki building, you'd come down maybe once or twice a week to buy a cup of coffee, and so that would kind of equal to your 100 purchases. Then we're looking at customer value. So how valuable are these customers that are working, or you're coming in and that you're serving coffee to? So if we then looked at if they're doing 100 purchases and their average value is $10, it's $1,000. So who's willing to spend that $100 on that, on acquiring that coffee customer now? And we're not even yet at the full customer lifetime value. So we now need to look at what the average lifespan is of a customer. We're now looking at and just to make it easy, you just add the total customer lifespans together of all your customers. You really need a CRM for this. This makes it a whole lot easier. I don't know if any of you are currently using a CRM. You said, Stuart, what are you using? Agile, yeah, all right. So if you can start looking at the actual date that customer first became a customer, and start looking at the lifetime that customer has been with you, that you're doing the financial advice to them, that's going to help you understand how much you can actually pay to acquire that customer to come in to become a client. So 30,000 years, 10,000 customers, that means that customer is around for about 3 years, the average lifetime of that customer. And then we come actually to the customer lifetime value. And so now we've got the $1,000 that we did over a 3-year period, and that customer that you're spending $100 to acquire is actually worth $3,000 to you. So all of a sudden your coffee business is different, right? You're now, it doesn't sound crazy to spend $100 to acquire a customer that's only going to be spending $3 or $4 with you. I know that, so once again, sorry, Ivan, financial guy in the room, so that obviously doesn't include the margins in that, and so you need to kind of work that in. But even at a 30% margin, or you would still be making heaps of cash on that acquisition. Speaking of acquisitions, so this is the other fun term that's thrown around in online marketing called CPA. So cost per acquisition, and this is a really important variable for you to have. It basically guides your understanding of what are you paying to get that customer to actually become a customer. And so we just did the math now to see that customer was worth $3,000, but how much of that $3,000 are you willing to spend to acquire that customer, to make them a long-term valued proposition for you? Justine, I don't know if you're spending any cash online, or you're driving any no, not so much, all right? So, sorry, the girl that does social media, I forgot your name. Yeah. Yes. No, you. Johanna, hi. So your clients may be spending $1,000 on Facebook. You're getting about 500 clicks for them. You work out a CPC, so that's the cost per click. So that's how much it costs you to get somebody onto your website. You then look at how many leads you get from that $1,000 spend. You maybe get 50 leads. So this works out about 10% conversion, which is pretty good. So if you're in an e-commerce kind of business, you're looking at about 2.5% to 5% is a good place to be for your conversion ratios. Kim, I'm not sure if you're driving people to your website, or you're selling your book on your website, are you doing anything like that? And so I don't know if that conversion ratio rings true for you, if there's some value in that metric to kind of think. Yeah, all right. Perfect. Perfect. So that means your cost per lead to acquire somebody is about $20. It's different in every business, and so sometimes you'll be just driving people to buy something on your websites, especially like an e-commerce company, where you're not really generating leads. But for Ivan, you're a perfect candidate to actually drive leads, as well as you, Bruce, as to just help get people onto your website, and you're wanting them to leave an email address or do something that you can engage with them later on. And so that CPL, that cost per lead, is really important for you. We then go, how many of those leads are you actually converting into customers? And so for this case, we created 10. Which now means your cost per acquisition is sitting around $100. And so if we bring it back to your lifetime value, how much are you willing to spend on that acquisition cost, and what's the lifetime value of your customer? So we're now ready to run a test campaign. We've got all this data, you've done all the analysis, you've got a pretty good understanding of who your audience is, and we're now wanting to change some behavior. So you're either wanting people to buy more, come to your store more often, change something. In this case, I'm going back to the toy company that I did some work for, and I'm wanting to change the male behavior. So all the males were buying not all, but most of them were buying on a Thursday. So that puts a lot of strain on your warehouse. And so it means that you've got a lot of people running around on Friday trying to get those orders out. So if we can change that behavior and move it to a Monday, Tuesday, or a Wednesday, that's going to help your operation significantly. We're going to use email to drive this. So email is a really cost-effective way to engage with your customers, and it's quick for you to get something out there and to just basically get a feel for what your customers are interested in, what they're clicking through, and the feedback that they're giving to you. Before you run your test, though, we need to get a baseline. And so that baseline is an email that you sent previously. So, Stuart, you would have sent emails to your customers, and you're needing to get an understanding of what the open rates are, what the click-through rates are, before you do this test. Because if the test is successful and you're getting, I don't know, you maybe got 10 people responding from a previous email and you're getting 50 responses from this, but you don't know from the previous email that you sent, you don't know if it's successful or not. So we're then going to test the email send. We're going to do one on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And we're going to try and figure out which day is going to get the highest response. And we're going to send it exactly at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. It's important because if you're sending email out on Monday, you're sending it out at 9 o'clock. Tuesday, you're sending it out at 12 o'clock. And you're changing the dates. Those variables have an impact on the click-through rate, on the open rates. And so it's important whenever you're doing a test that everything is equal other than the one thing that you're testing. So you generally want just one element that you're testing. In this case, a blue one or a green one. It's that simple, and you keep learning from those tests that you're doing. So in this case, maybe the blue one works better. So next week you're doing a blue one and a red one and see which one works better. And so you just keep changing until you get to the ultimate best working formula for your business. A good way to learn is to just subscribe to heaps of spam emails, because those guys are sending out heaps and heaps of emails, and so they're learning and from all the emails that they're sending. So if you're following their format, it's a good starting point for you to start if you haven't been doing any emails before. At least I'm not sure if you're sending out emails to your clients for your job seekers and trying to kind of gauge or looking at what their open rates are, or... Yeah, okay. Perfect. So this is our next kind of stage. So this is probably a little bit more of an advanced kind of marketing strategy for the people in this room. And so it's kind of creating those lookalike audiences. So you've already got some people on your database, they've worked with you, they've bought with you, and they're easier to kind of use as a benchmark of what kind of people would do well. And I think, Stuart, this will be great for you for your financial advice. I don't know if you're calling advice, you're kind of helping people to get to the financial advisor, I'm not sure what. Yeah, education. So that financial education that you're doing, those people that are interested or engaged in that, because you've got a whole lot of those email addresses, you're able to load those email addresses up into Facebook or Google or LinkedIn. And what those platforms do is they try and replicate the behavior that your existing clients have and go like, hey, this person's searching for this, they're clicking on this, they've got a dog, they are married, whatever the criteria is that your existing database has, and it tries to find similar people for you. And you'll find that the click-through rates on those banners or that communication is often a lot higher and a lot better. So this will help you if you don't know who to target, what the psychographics are. If you don't want to go through all the stuff that I showed you with all the analysis, you can just upload a whole lot of email addresses and Google or Facebook will kind of figure it out for you, and it just saves you heaps of analytics. So for the Toy Story, once again, we were going to do the US clients because there was 32% of those people in the US, and we wanted to target them. And I may use the Australian audience and go like, hey, here are a whole lot of Australians that are doing this kind of behavior, upload it into Facebook or LinkedIn and go, hey, can you find me the same kind of people, but in the US? And so it's your first starting block. It's just it's a first step before you do all your tests, to just go like, hey, never advertised in the US before, where do I start? Who are the people that I need to speak to? And because you've got some existing information, you can load that up into the platform, and it will maybe help you out with that. Retargeting. So pretty sure nobody is doing some retargeting here. However, I think that this is especially good for Bruce, Ivan, people that are looking at a journey, people that are selling a more complex product, people that are, so a car maybe, so something that you have a longer decision-making time over works well for retargeting. Or you can shorten the time frame if you've got a more e-commerce-y type site and you're selling, I don't know, a pair of jeans or shoes or something, and people generally make a decision within 3 or 4 days, and they may just reluctantly make that purchase, but if you show them an ad in 2 or 3 days' time that says there's a 10% discount on that shoes, they'll then potentially click on your ad and buy. Whereas long-term purchases, a car decision could be a 6-month process for you, to kind of make decisions. And so if you, over a period of time, you can start showing those ads and keep reminding that customer of the value and the research that they've done on that car. Multivariant testing. So this is a step up from the A/B testing that we spoke about earlier on. And you will find that when you're doing lots of A/B tests, that you'll get to a point where you're just not getting any more additional wins. It's stagnant. You're maybe getting a 0.001% increase, and there's just nothing in that A/B test anymore. You then may throw everything out, keep your one ad that's working really well, and go, okay, I'm going to come up with a whole lot of new ideas. I'm going to put the buttons in different places. I'm going to put a video on one email. I'm going to put just text in one email and no pictures. And you can kind of really mix it up and just kind of test out a whole lot of things at the same time to see what's working. Lead nurture. So this is something Stuart, Ivan, Bruce, these are good tactics for you to think about and use in your business. So for Ivan, you get somebody onto your website. You want to do something that educates them. So for instance, for you, you spoke about earlier about the grants. So if you were to educate people that were coming onto your website and they were saying that these are all the grants that are available, I'm like, great, I didn't know that. It's an education piece. You then ask them to put an email address in, and that you will email them when that grant, when you can actually start applying for that grant. So there's a date in there, and they're going, oh, great. Somebody else will just tell me when I can do this. I'll keep watching the website to see when the grant becomes available. And at that point, when the grant becomes available, you send them an email and go, hey, the grant's just become available. Let me help you fill in the form to acquire that grant for COVID. And all of a sudden, you've informed them of something that they didn't know. You've educated them, you've informed them, and so their propensity to sign up with you exponentially increases, especially if they're evaluating you compared to a couple of other business coaches out there. Why is this not going forward? Attribution modeling. So this is the hardcore stuff that nobody here is doing, but hopefully if you can see the value in some of the more entry-level things and you can see the value in your business, you will start seeing where we can go with the data, how exciting it can get, and how much money it can save you if you're really smart at manipulating data. So what attribution modeling is I suppose the quickest or easiest way that I can explain it is if you kind of imagine a soccer team, the keeper kicks the ball to a center kicks it to a defender kicks it to a striker scores a goal. So who do you want to give the credit to for scoring the goal? You're going, well, the striker scored the goal, but it was the whole team was involved in maneuvering that ball. So you go like, well, if it's just a striker, then take everybody else off the team and just have the striker running around on the field and see how well he does, right? And marketing is exactly the same way. It's sometimes you'll click on a LinkedIn ad, sometimes you'll click on a Facebook, then you'll do a search on Google, then you may go to the website and sign up. So who do you attribute the value to? Who's the most important in that cycle? And so for every business, there's a different way of thinking about this attribution. So here are a couple of, yes?
So the attribution modelling, to think outside the square, it has to actually go to also the coach, the owner, sponsors, the whole enterprise.
Exactly.
Yeah, not just that.
Totally. And so it's
the community, if you get a sale, it has to go outside your enterprise to actually thank the community in the way they see it.
Very much so. I think that there are a whole lot of people. So if you think of yourself, you're wanting to buy a car. So you may just search for what's the best SUV for under $50,000, right? So it's just a very broad search on Google. You then start getting a list, and maybe it's car advice or, I don't know, whatever other website is doing car talk. You may read a couple of articles on that. You're then on LinkedIn, and there's something pops up on LinkedIn, and there's another article on, hey, this is the best car ever. You're like, okay, hey, let me read that. You then start narrowing that search down, and you go like, hey, well, these are my top 3. I'm going to start looking at those more in depth. And you're now doing different kinds of searches. You're now going, I'm looking for a BMW or a Mercedes or a Mazda or a Holden. And so those are very specific kind of searches. You then may decide, okay, hey, the BMW X5 is where I'm at. The next search that you're doing is BMW X5. You go through and type in, hey, I want to speak to a salesperson at that level. So now when you're looking at your stats, it looks like the keyword BMW X5 in your Google is driving all the sales. but in fact, it was the content that was created on Facebook, the YouTube clip that you looked at, the guy that you spoke down the road at the pub. He's like, hey, I've been having a great experience. And so all of these people were involved in that sale. And this is about which model kind of best suits your advertising needs to best, I suppose, get the best return on investment for you. So I'll run through a couple of them just to kind of help you think differently about attribution. So this is your last touch point. So you may go, it's too hard to figure all this stuff out. I'm doing radio ads, I'm doing billboards, I'm doing whatever it is. Everybody eventually comes to my website, so I'm just going to invest heavily in my website. My website's the last point before they become a client. That's my last point of attribution. Or the last non-direct. So this could be the Google, the Facebook, the point that they make the decision to click to get to your website just before you actually do the purchase. And this may be the emails. So Stuart, those emails that you're sending out, so those become very important to you, and you've already recognized that, and that's why you have a CRM system, because you go like, hey, I've got to be able to communicate effectively with this audience. Then there's the first interaction. So this is your soccer player. It's a goalie. He started the whole thing. So maybe it was that Facebook ad, that social media something, that post that you did that just grabbed somebody's attention. They were never aware of your brand before, never aware of anything else. And I think this is often a challenge with social media, is that if you're trying to get a direct return on investment on your social media spend, it's not often there, because somebody is busy looking at cat videos, or they're looking at baby pictures of their niece. They're not in a mindset of buying something, but that ad is interrupting whatever it is, the content that they're reviewing. And you're then going, hey, let me check that out. I'm not going to buy it now, but I'll just check it out. Later on, I'll maybe do a Google search for it, and then I'll buy. So Google comes out as the hero in driving the actual sale, but it may have started out somewhere else. Then we get to linear attribution. So this is kind of a socialist kind of attribution model, where you just go like, everybody's equal, allocate 20% to everybody, it's all good. Everybody's important. Time decay attribution model. So somebody may have clicked on your LinkedIn ad a year ago, and nothing's happened, and they've done a search on Google yesterday, and they become a client. So you may kind of remove or kind of dissolve the value that the LinkedIn ad had because it was a year ago, and add a little bit more value to the last click. So maybe you can maybe reduce it by 10%. For every month that somebody hasn't purchased, you just reduce that by 10%. And you can make these variables up for your own business as you feel that they are kind of suiting your return on investment. And then a position-based attribution model. So this is where you're kind of going, hey, the people that started the whole process are really important, and the platform that ended the whole kind of sign up is really important. So I'm going to give 40% to each one of those outliers, and everything in the middle. So all the YouTube ads, the content, everything else that you did in between that, it's just all kind of, you just put that all into the same box. Okay, so this is my super exciting stuff. So this is the things that I get really, really excited for. It's totally outside of the realm of everybody in this room, but I want you, and maybe Jared, when you're kind of looking for your job, or I suppose the lady that was just finished studying, that's starting the beauty care, sorry, you're doing social media, to just kind of get you excited about the possibilities of marketing and the possibilities of using data. So I worked with a Wi-Fi company and helped them monetize that Wi-Fi so that I was able to do a location-based email. So we did it for a company called Hungry Jack's. So they're a big food franchise in New South Wales. I haven't seen them around here so much. And so what we were able to do is, I knew that people had walked into the Hungry Jack's. The next day, as they were walking past the Hungry Jack's store, we were able to send them an email and invite those people in. So anybody that's doing any kind of email marketing of any sort, will know that a 5 to 10% kind of click-through rate is huge. I was getting a 45% click-through rate on those email sends because they were so targeted to that audience at that exact location. I also used the Wi-Fi to do triangulation. And so I was able to figure out how many people were walking past the store versus how many people coming into the store. So if you had a sign on the side outside of your window and you said, hey, come and get 10% off a pair of shoes, I would be able to see how effective that sign is. Stuart, here, do you want to say anything? No? All right. It looked like you had a question in mind there. And so I was also able to then figure out exactly how many people you needed to have behind the counter on a Wednesday morning versus a Friday afternoon. And we were able to look at and help a lot of the stores and go like, you're only opening up at 9 o'clock, but you've got most of your traffic is passing your store between 8 and 9 a.m. on the way to work. You need to open up a little earlier and you'd increase your sales. And so that extra half an hour that they're opening would exponentially increase their revenue, as well as just being able to go like, you know what, you don't need 3 people behind the counter on Friday afternoons. It's quiet. Just get 1 person in there. Or people were standing in queue for very long times on Wednesday afternoons. Get somebody else helping out. You know, you're losing customers on Wednesday afternoons. And so we were able to tie all that data in. So with the app that they had on their phone, we were able to tie that into the point of sale systems that they were on the tills and match that all up and be able to figure out exactly how much extra value that email send was driving revenue-wise to that specific store. Any questions? It is super cool. So that's me. Please fire off questions. Anything that you're struggling with in your business right now, any social media issues that you're having, challenge that you're facing, the people that you're providing jobs to or trying to help with their jobs, how are they finding you? Whatever you're struggling with, let me know, and let me see if I can help you. Yes, Brett.
So where do you recommend that, because most of us, or quite a few of us in that small space.
Yes.
Where do you recommend we start?
That Excel spreadsheet that I showed you, the nasty kind of horrible slide that I had up, just put an Excel spreadsheet together. And as you're going through and putting every single customer that you have in that spreadsheet and put as much data as you can. And when you start analyzing that data and go like, oh, it's taking so long to do this function, you're like, okay, great, there must be a solution for that. And at that point, you will know what kind of software to go and search for to solve the problem that you're experiencing. Yeah. Yes, Ashra.
You mentioned about the website.
Yes.
And I've noticed some of the websites have got an US IP compared to an Australian IP.
Yes.
So when you do that triangulation, do you end up doing a US triangulation there?
No, so that's for cell phones, and we're using, I'm using access points. So in an access point, there are 3 aerials in there, and so they're very close together. But I'm using their 4 kind of attributes. So it's a MAC address, a timestamp, and the signal strength. And I'm using those 3 bits of data to triangulate the movement patterns of somebody. How cool is that? Sorry.
That's CIA.
Yeah.
Yes,
so their phone has to be being able to, has to be on that roaming kind of setting. So what I would then do is, I wouldn't know the gender of somebody, so I would look at who was going into the male bathrooms and who was going into the female bathrooms with using Wi-Fi, right? And so now I've got some data to go like, hey, it's mostly males going to the store, mostly males in this area. And as people were registering on the app, I now could see we were doing stuff for Woolworths, and I could see exactly males between the ages of 25 and 30, how long they were spending in one aisle, and that certain aisles were preferable for women and certain aisles were preferable for males. And so we were able to change the stock that was on each one of those shelves based on the data that we were having. Anything else? So some of the people that had opted in, so we were able to then they have to opt in. We can't just force messages onto people. So they had an app on their phone, and the app was allowing them to get the free Wi-Fi. And those people we could communicate with, but anybody that didn't have an app, I could still track their phone and still infer some data on that, right? And that data I was then able to use for stores or to help stores become smarter at the way that they needed to communicate with their audience.
So sorry, just
Yes.
one moment.
Yeah, ahead.
So after you've messaged,
Yes.
are you then able to go and look at their psychographics and demographics and all that data?
So some of them, because they would have registered on the app, we would have some of that information. And then once again, we get some information. So if depending on your CRM system, it's called digital fingerprinting. And so if what you're able to do is to, for instance, if you were driving traffic through to a website and those people aren't registering right now, your CRM system builds up a profile of that audience. And so when they eventually sign up to that, so in Ivan's case, that information about the grant, the CRM throws all that past information, everything else that they did on the website, it all associates to that profile, to that email. So I now know that that person downloaded my white paper, they watched my video, they looked at a whole lot of other things, and that means that lead nurture component, when that lead comes through, when that email comes through to me, I'm able to score that email at a lot higher rate. So Bruce, for you is, you're looking at that company that's looking at booking you for that next leadership. There are a couple of tire kickers out there that are just going like, hey, so how much do you charge? Like, you're kind of getting back to those people versus somebody that's been onto your site multiple times. They've watched your video, they've downloaded a white paper, and they've engaged with you a lot more. And now they've gone, hey, how much do you charge for a session, a consultation, or a group training exercise? And so at that point, you're willing to put in a lot more effort into the email and the communication that you're getting from that because you know that the buyer is a lot more serious. And so it helps you with your sales. So especially for you, Lynn, it's something to think about when you're doing that sales, to do that lead scoring for the clients that you have, is helping them understand that lead scoring system.
So that multivariate data collation
Yes.
is only using the cell phone as the...
So the multiple platforms was cell phones, but it was also using the point of sale, so that the actual till stuff, as well as the email. So we're using a CRM system to send the email out. So we had to combine all of that information to be able to understand what the user's behavior was like. The multivariate testing is a testing methodology, not the platforms that we're looking at.
Yes.
Okay.
So I just wanted to ask, Carlos, do we have any questions on the chat? Well, let's give Jason a big round of applause.